We are live. Hello, this is Brandon coming at you with episode one of our Untitled podcast. And today I am joined by Fatina. Um,
Hello, hello.
hello, good morning. And today's podcast, we're just gonna have a conversation as a test episode. Um, Testing, do our ideas work? Can we talk to each other without sounding weird? And the through line here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a psychological framework that models human needs as having different priorities. Generally, you have to go. Generally, kids don't learn in school if they're hungry, which sounds pretty obvious in today's age, but in the 1940s when this was studied, um, that wasn't a known concept. We've since graduated from that, but based on some topics that Fatina and I came up with, it seemed reasonable that this would be a good through line. So then the hierarchy of needs would be first physiological, food, water, shelter, temperature. Second layer, safety and security. Third, love and belonging. Fourth, self esteem. And then fifth, self actualization. So, without further ado, I am going to turn over to Fatina for our first topic.
So is our physical in today's day and anxiety levels are running high in children, and there's a lot of screen time going into our daily activities more than the time that we spend outside actually in the sun. Where does the physical health play a part in our daily lives? What kind of role the diet plays? Are we exercising enough? Are we getting enough rest based on everything that we do in a day? That goes from children all the way up to adults who are actually working behind screens mostly uh, because of the AI boom that we've come across. More and more people are spending time online than they actually do going to the office, because most people are, in a remote working setup mostly. So that's basically what we're going to be discussing. I'll start off by, what do you think um, the diet looks like for younger children, especially now that most people are, very busy and have a hard time putting together a proper meal. What do you think about that?
Um, I think just, I'll start generally and then more specific. I think generally, it people's diets today, it's speed, convenience, because time is such a luxury. I remember growing up, um, I have like both of my parents worked, and one of the constant struggles was food needed to be on the table. I mean, not a struggle, but food needed to be on the table. And in order to do that, somebody had to go to the grocery store, someone had to plan the meals, cook the meals, all of that. It's its own form of domestic labor. And we're seeing as people get busier, that's one of the first things to get cut. So some people that I work with or that I know outside of work, they've transitioned to like meal planning services or meal kit services like Blue Apron or their competitors. And I think it trickles down to kids. You don't see, I imagine the quality of those meals is changing. I think like the parents are still going to feed their kids, but when it comes down to they just got off of an 8 hour shift, they've had to commute through traffic, they're getting home later in the afternoon or evening, they still have their own things that they have going on. The kids have things going on.
Yeah.
You're not always going to have time to cook.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I was also thinking, like, time wise, yeah, it's of a struggle to put a meal together, plan it, and make sure that, the kids are eating healthy, or even if we're eating enough, protein or fiber and all of that, like planning all of that becomes such a hassle, especially if you're leading a very busy life. But also, I feel like the quality of the ingredients has also gone down a little bit. I mean, I grew up with my grandparents and my parents and even my aunts and uncles telling us that food used to have this specific smell. Like if you used to cook the rice, the whole neighborhood would know that this house is, cooking rice, because the smell was so aromatic, and it would, spread out and stuff. And I didn't used to think much of it. You're growing up, you just think, they're doing the old people talk and stuff like that. But now that I've grown up and I actually think about it, and it's true, the food quality and the quality of the ingredients, the smell of it, the texture of it, the way it makes you feel, it's it's definitely declined. And I feel like, it's all it's all boiling down to us thinking about, creating our own ingredients in our backyards and stuff, and not depending on those pesticide dependent ingredients anymore, because it's definitely taking a big toll on our health and physical being. I mean, do you think like that?
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I'm in transportation, so I know some of agribusiness from the transportation side, and I'll just use poultry for example because that's the one that will get me in the least trouble, but explains the
Mhm.
point. The idea of you go out back, you slaughter a chicken, um, and that's on your table the same day. That idea is all but foreign these days. You don't have local butcher shops. Instead, you have these commercial scale farms, and you can tell the difference. I remember we slaughtered a chicken, and it was so much less fatty. It was such a different experience compared to what
Mm.
you would get in the grocery store. And imagine that being repeated across your produce, your vegetables, your meat, and you, the, you're definitely noticing it. It's not crazy talk. I don't,
Yeah.
yeah. Can I ask you
I,
this?
I mean, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask you, so in Pakistan, is everything like commercialized farming, or is it still kind of, do you go to the market, you're meeting the farmers? What's that like? Or could you speak to that?
No, we don't exactly meet the farmers. So we have a bit of both going on, right? So a very, very common sight you'll see here is that there's this big truck loaded with those I don't remember the word for it's those white chickens. What do you call them?
I think they're
There's
just
this word
chickens.
that no, there's a word used for those chickens because they're brought up synthetically, like with a lot of injections and a lot of
Oh,
feed, so they grow up faster. There's this word we use here. I forget what that word is, but basically those chickens, and
hmm.
they're being loaded in the back of a truck, which is obviously too small for them. The chickens are screaming, obviously uncomfortable. It's like such a terrible sight to see, and you see it everywhere here, right? And those chickens are then sold to people in the market, butchers in the markets. Like we have these markets over here. Some will just, keep them in terrible conditions at the back of their shop and then bring them out, slaughter them in front of you to show how fresh they are. But the chickens are either sick or they look very sickly and in very poor conditions. I cannot describe to you how poor those conditions are that they're kept in. Like that's a very common sight to see. And it like people who can't afford like commercialized or proper clean meat, they have to resort those to those options, right? And that's basically half half your health goes down just by looking at what kind of meat you're eating. Yeah. And then people who can afford to have organic meat, they'll have access to farms. They'll go to the farms themselves, have those that watch the chickens grow up properly, give them proper feed and all of that. And that's the people who can afford to get that kind of meat, right? So they prioritize health, and it's okay for them to do that. But others who don't have that kind of time, who don't have the luxury of, accessing those farms or those properly bred chickens, they have to resort to those poorly kept chickens, right? And um, the the quality of the meat, it's so different. It's like you're eating plastic versus eating actual meat. Like, that's how big of a difference it is. And it's not even like they're trying to hide it. It's not like people haven't come to them and said, okay, this isn't how it's supposed to go. But they just don't care. They're like, that's just how it is, and you have to, make your peace with it. That kind of thing. So there's like a big vast difference between the rich and the poor.
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah, that's what it looks like here.
Yeah, I I definitely agree, and you see the same thing here. I I live in a say diverse city in
Hmm.
terms of economic outlook, and see the same things where most people, they go to the grocery store and they get one set of options. They go to the farmer's market or the butcher, you have a different, like, you have more organic options, but then the price of meat these days, just to begin with, it's so prohibitively expensive. A
Hmm.
pack of ground beef, I mean, pre-COVID, it was like $3 for a pound, and I thought that was crazy. And just anecdotally, I can say that that has doubled, if not tripled, and that's not even talking about higher cuts of beef. Um,
Hmm.
Chicken, I'm always looking for what's on sale, because, or what's cheap, because trying to go buy organic or something like that, it's untenable financially for me. It's more than double or triple the price for the same, like, for the same amount of meat. So I
Yeah,
definitely see what you're saying. It's here and it's in Pakistan. That's crazy.
yeah. I mean, it definitely, it's like breaking us down in in a very slow but steady way. And I mean, nutrition plays a major role in your mental development as a child, right? And I think maybe as children, we were still in those times where these things hadn't progressed as rampantly as they have now. And maybe we still got some good nutrition here and there, but now it's like everyone's weaker because of it, people can't lift as well as they could unless, they're taking proper care of their nutrition. The fruits taste a little bit weird, and they look weirder as well than they used to. It's everything is turning synthetic in a way.
Yeah. And just to kind of talk about my own experience, like around
Mm.
farming, my grandparents lived in the country. We would spend, it feels like day, I know it wasn't literally days, it was only a couple hours, but it felt like we would spend days in the hot sun. We'd go weed the garden. We'd help them plant watermelons, greens, peas. We'd go out and have to shuck corn. All, like, it was so much work. And I'm saying this especially as a kid. So much work, but the food at the end of the day was much better.
I mean, I
It,
bet it tasted great after that all that work too.
yeah, I mean that too, but I mean we would like, even to the point we would freeze that corn, and I mean a year or two later it still tasted better than anything you bought in the store.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing.
yeah, so it it's definitely noticeable. And from the standpoint of, like, to your point, to the development, I don't know if there's studies on this or we don't know, but I can't imagine that you take something and you make it less nutritious or you load it up with chemicals and it's better for you. And kind of the opposite example is, in some places in Asia that are hit with famine or they don't have a lot of resources, they bioengineer the rice to add other nutrients. I think it's golden rice for vitamin A because there's no natural sources of that. So you see the opposite is possible where we can make crops that are better for people, but a lot of
Mm.
it instead it's focused on what makes money.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, it's about what's more efficient by, putting in the least amount of effort and getting quicker results. And that comes at a cost of health.
Yeah, 100% that. And I think that's just where I feel, um, yeah, that's just where I feel kids are really missing out. And I think,
I mean, it really
oh,
puts you on edge, doesn't it? Like it makes you think that there's no hope left for us. Because if you don't have the luxury of time, if you don't have the time to actually start planting your own crop, then you're basically just poisoning yourself.
yeah. I mean, even if you had the time, you don't have the space. A lot of people rent
Yeah.
or they're in apartments. You don't have that. And then anytime you like, or the idea of a community garden or initiatives like that, those fall on deaf ears, or it's a very niche idea. Um, because in order for people to, like, it's this great trade-off for people to be able to work in the service economy. People, you have to automate and standardize and make the agribusiness more efficient, which
Mm.
it in a lot of ways it's a good thing, but it comes back to, so why, like, why do we do this in agribusiness? Because it wasn't entirely like this, in my grandparents' generation, the 50s and
Mm.
60s. My parents got some of it, 70s, 80s, early 90s, but then my brother and I's generation, he's Gen Z. I'm on that Gen Z Zillennial border, and that's kind of where I feel like it makes things different. And then it's like you see the kids these days, and it's just like, what's wrong with you? And then you remember everything that was going on. Like, I remember things changed in the like things were changing in the 2000s. And then I remember like watching my brother grow up in the 2010s, and it's like, no, it's just a different world now. It changed so
Yeah,
fast.
definitely. It's changing faster too now. Like it used to take years before things changed before, but or maybe we just didn't notice back then. But they're changing faster now. Like in a year, things can go from, completely unbuilt and completely um not properly organized to properly urbanized and robots and screens and all of that in like less than a year. So things are definitely more fast paced now, and like the kids know more than we ever did during our time in that age. Like
Right.
back when I was 12 or maybe even 13, I don't think I could say the word AI properly and actually know what it meant, even though I know technology of it has been in the works, and the whole theory of AI has been in works for years, and it was probably there when I was 12 as well. But I couldn't say artificial intelligence if it saved my life. All I knew was about robots, but I didn't know what went behind them. But now you talk to kids and you're like, were we dumber? back then, or is there like an information overload happening at their age, or like what's going on? So I feel like kids are smarter now, or maybe they have like access to more information because of internet and their iPads and their screens. But at the same time, they're less fit than we used to be. There's less physical activity, there's less exposure to sun, and even if there's sun, it's like terrible sun. There's a lot of global warming and all of that. So things are different, and the children now have a different things to survive from than we did.
Yeah. Can I ask you this?
Mhm.
So, do kids still go outside and run around and be kids in Pakistan as
Oh
of
no,
this year?
not at all.
Wow.
I None of the kids around me do that anymore. I mean, even at me as a child, actually went out and, you know, played around like that. But I've heard like maybe it's a privilege thing, or maybe our parents were more overprotective. I don't know. But I've definitely heard people my age tell us stories about how they used to go out and play cricket in the alleys and stuff. But we never did that as kids. It was always inside the house, in the garage, or the verandas, and with our cousins only. No one from, the neighborhood. We never actually like went outside the house like that, because our parents always, told us, and they were right too, because it was a very unsafe thing to do, to hang out with the neighborhood kids, especially the things you hear now on the news and stuff. It's gotten more unsafe, or maybe the news is covering it more. Things are pretty bad safety wise here in Pakistan, especially with kids. So I've never personally gone out and played outside at all. But kids used to, and now you see less and less of that, unless, the parents are accompanying the kids and in the parks in the local towns and stuff. But not like it used to be.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think that's one of the differences between me and my brother.
Hmm.
I remember being outside a lot, as much as we could be outside. We were outside. Our parents wanted us outside, running around, doing stuff. We try to come inside and they're like, no, get your back outside. I'm like, all right. Or don't be running in and out of this house. My grandparents were the same way of like, go outside, do something, go shoot basketball, go try to hit the golf ball, go watch nature, go play with the dog, anything but be inside. I mean, my grandparents were, like growing, like you mentioned screen time, so I'm kind of bringing this in, but I remember growing up, my grandparents were, if you were up, if you were up early, screen TV was off before 9. TV did not come on before 7. You were in bed by 9. And then at home, we didn't play video games during the weekend. I mean, sorry, yeah, we didn't play video games during the week. TV was only what the family was watching during the week. And then weekends, yeah, we could kind of do what we want, but at some point, our parents were like, "Look, y'all got to go outside." Um, and it's
That's a
just
great
so
thing to
weird.
have.
Yeah, like
I mean,
yeah, it's like
that's
my
a good thing that it used to work like that. But what about your brother? Did he spend most of his time indoors?
I would say like he did and didn't. I definitely I'd say up until I'd say like when we were able to, because safety was another thing, like that was a consideration.
Hmm.
But when it was safe, he was outside, and then just as he reached his teenage years, it just wasn't a thing. Um, Kids weren't outside in the neighborhood. Kids just didn't do that anymore, and it was weird to me because it's like that's all we did. I mean, yeah, we liked our
Mm.
video games, but at a certain point, we're like, yeah, let's go get half the neighborhood together and play football or something. And it's like you just don't see kids do that.
I mean, the
Um,
story you're telling me, I'm going to give a little bit of a U-turn to the conversation, but the stories you're telling me, they sound very familiar to the stories the boys my age used to tell me, that they used to do that, get
mm,
the neighborhood together and, play like that. But you never hear those stories from girls. So maybe I don't know if that's a thing in America or not, but definitely a major thing in Pakistan. You won't hear girls tell you stories about going out and, playing freely and all of that.
yeah, and that I hate that for you, like from a safety
Yeah,
standpoint, because that's ridiculous. Like that's ridiculous. But then again,
um,
it's like someone
yeah,
will
yeah,
just snatch up. But like people have no shame about snatching up girls at 30, 12-year-old.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it used to
yeah.
be a thing about girls, but now even boys aren't safe. And I mean, the majority is girls, obviously. Like, it's terrible, awful to be, growing up in a place that has zero regard for the safety of children, girls, or women. Like, it's terrible. I can't even begin to describe how terrible it is, because the news that I hear every day, even like a few weeks ago, and like a 6-month old baby was raped by a
What?
17-year-old boy. Yeah, yeah. And he was a cousin, I believe, and he used to come and visit the house like a lot. And I think it was 6-month-old or 8-month-old baby. And he took her outside to play, apparently, because he used to do that a lot. And then when he brought her back, she was like unconscious and she wasn't well. And the aunt who was taking care of the baby, because the mother was out working, noticed that the baby wasn't waking up. And then she took him to the hospital. And when they, checked her, she was bleeding. And then they did a postmortem. And then that's how they figured it out. And the baby passed. And this is the news from like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I am always at the point where I'm like in a constant state of rage because of everything I hear. And it's just so unsafe to grow up here as a girl.
Wow.
'Cause
That's
you cannot trust anyone.
that's wild to me. Um, I think my own experience, um, growing like I don't want to say growing up, but in different neighborhoods and economic demographics, it used to be that um, you had neighborhoods that were safe, and then you had places that were unsafe. You didn't see women out in certain neighborhoods. You would see them out in others. And one of the um, rules of thumb, or heuristics, if you will, was if you see, and this is not to be racist, but I'm being racist. If you see white women out in the neighborhood, it's a safe neighborhood, or that neighborhood is about to get gentrified. Because you don't like, depending on where you lived, you were not outside like that, or if you were at the park.
Mm,
Because that was the safe place to be, or like that was where women went because there were other women around, there were safe men around, whatever. And it's like I see like one of the neighborhoods that I go to in Nashville, it's like 2 blocks over it are the projects, or there's low income housing, and then you'll see just women walking in the street. And it's like it's such a visual gag to see, like, just all these
mm,
terrible places, and then a couple of years later you see half of those houses torn down and rebuilt, with these things that are called tall and skinnies here, so all of the old architectural styles are gone. And then you're seeing all of these well-to-do white families moving in, and it's like they take over the neighborhood. It's almost funny,
Mm.
but you're watching the fabric of the city of Nashville change, or any city really. It, it it's fascinating, and it's like the marker for that is, are the women safe?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely like that here as well. Like, there's certain neighborhoods that women just can't go out in, and the stories you hear, stories like rape and stuff that you hear about little children getting picked up from the streets and stuff. That's always, I mean, I think it's always from places that are more lower income, but also the- I feel like it's a generally unsafe place to be, because those men, they'll be out on any street, they'll be in the markets, they'll be everywhere. So it doesn't really matter if you're in a safer neighborhood. If you go in the market, you're still unsafe. So
Yeah,
it's like it's not safe. You just have to be always on edge. You always have to be looking behind your back if you're going out for a walk, if you choose to go out on a walk. And you have to make sure that you're dressed in a way that doesn't draw attention to you. And if it does, then it's your fault. And if it doesn't, then why were you out at that time? And why were you alone? Why weren't you accompanied by somebody? What were you doing out? Like, it's that kind of thing that pisses me off so much, because you're not allowed to do anything that will make you happy unless, it's accepted by the general public in some way. And I thought it was just Pakistan, but I noticed that everywhere I go, and maybe it's just a thing, that you'll always be criticized for what you do, whether you choose yourself or whether you let go. It's just so, you know, bad to
yeah.
grow up as a woman sometimes. But I think we detract the conversation a little bit.
No,
So
it's an organic
let's
space.
move.
We
Yeah,
can stay, like, let's stay in this realm, because I think this is more fascinating than what we wrote originally. Or yeah,
yeah.
uh,
I mean, definitely. Like, you have sisters.
yeah.
Do they explain their childhood differently than you do?
I don't have sisters per se. Um, I will say that my mom and I are close in age, like, not like
Mm-hmm,
close in age, but like she's Gen X, I'm a Zillennial, so it's like we're not so far off in age. Um,
mm-hmm,
I think two things. To your point about safety, I remember I was living in a different place a few years ago. And to me,
mm-hmm,
I didn't really think about my surroundings because I'm a guy. Um, there's
mm-hmm.
things you obviously don't do. You mind your business. That I think that's the biggest one. You mind your business. You
Yeah.
don't go anywhere you're not supposed to be. If you don't know the people, you don't have a purpose for being there. Don't just go places. Um, but the place I was staying at, it had a homeless problem, and it wasn't on my mind until she comes to visit me, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do this at night," and I'm like, "You're doing what?" And then I start really checking things, and it's like
Mm,
this whole world of safety and concerns opened up that I didn't care about. Um,
mm,
and it's kind of sad that that wasn't like, it's such a different perspective on life from that standpoint. And then I think the other thing is my mom grew up in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s, and I mean, like, people were out gang banging. uh Both of my parents, but um it was probably safer for her to be outside than it was for my dad, um
oh,
because of gang violence specifically. But even then, it's like I'm sure like I'm gonna have to ask her about it now that we're talking, but I
Mm.
can't see how I can't see how her everyday concerns and my dad's everyday concerns were the same because at a certain point it's like my dad like at a certain point it's like no one's really gonna mess with my dad, um
Mm.
or just men generally. There's just a certain point no one's really gonna mess with them. But then you get to women and it's like no matter what they do, there's always that threat of they provide access to something that men want, and some men just do not care.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you a for instance. So it's like everyday things, you know. Um, so once I'd recently shifted cities and I was out for the first time on my own working and stuff, right? And the place where I was staying uh was like a 5-minute walk to the place where I work, right? It was like literally crossing the street and the building was right there. And every day that I would walk, there would be this guy on the building that would, make weird noises at me. And this was an everyday thing. And I, I mean, it started, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening. I was obviously very disturbed by it. So I stopped walking there and I had to, get a cab just to walk. Instead of walking those 5 minutes, I had to, pay that extra money and get a cab just to for it to cross the street. And the driver would always go like, you could have walked there. Why are you so lazy? And I had to take that in because I couldn't explain to him why it was hard for me to walk over there. So it's like
Mhm.
everyday things. And then people at work, the men would go like, oh, you take a cab here? Oh my God, you're so privileged, you have to pay money just so you don't have to walk. And I had to stay quiet in all those times because, you know, why should I tell them why? And then it became such a thing for me that I developed this fear of crossing the roads, and I always had to cross them in a way so that I'd be walking against the traffic so nobody could, touch me, and I wouldn't see it coming so I could fight anything off. Like I started developing this sense of, I'm always being watched. I always have to make sure where the traffic is coming from, if there's anyone following me, all of that.
Mhm.
And when you talk to men about crossing the streets, they're going to be like, "Oh, there's traffic. You just put your hand up and you cross it." That's all they'll think about. They won't even think twice about, just walking to the office like an everyday thing for them. So it's a very small area of my life. Obviously, growing up, there was a lot of other things, but this is just like a tiny, for instance, of what a woman has to go through. So there's always such a massive privilege that most men grow up with, and they're mostly never even aware of it unless they sit down and have an actual conversation with a woman, and then they'll be like, oh, you think about these things? Like,
Yeah.
for instance, like when you're going out running, the natural thing for most people is to put a headset in, play the volume on of their favorite playlist, and just run to their heart's content. But a woman, she has to take one side off to make sure she can be aware of her surroundings. And but the whole time she's running, she's actually making sure that she's not being followed and that nobody's, trying to snatch her away or poison her in any way, or just trying to grope her. So it's a very different thing. Something that you doing for your health becomes a high cortisol activity for some reason, and that's where all the difference lies.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's funny how we've kind of talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs without talking about it. So it's like you want to work on your health, you want to be active, you want to run, or you want to build your career, but but it comes back to the second need in the hierarchy. I have to be safe.
Yeah.
And not just, oh, well, I don't want guys looking at me, but there's danger, life altering danger. And I mean, I've been in spaces where every so often it's like, this place isn't safe, but it's a passing feeling, or
Mhm.
I have the ability to change those circumstances outside of the color of my skin. Um,
Mm.
but even then, like, it's not something I think about every day. Where it's like, all right, these women are trying to literally snatch me up. That just doesn't happen. Um,
Yeah.
that's not that's not a woman's brand of violence for a number of reasons. Versus for women, it's literally the act of going outside um, could lead to a sexual assault or worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like an act of war, you know? It's like you're in a constant state of war since you're born. And
Mm,
like I would I, I wish that it was an exaggeration that I was saying that it's from the instant you're born, but the recent events that I've heard about, it's literally, the second you're born, it's over for you. And it's just I wish I lived to see the day where that's not the case.
yeah, I do too. And just to kind of, it's like one of the things that get talked about in some of our workplace seminars is psychological safety. It kind of grows up from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And
Hmm.
one of the things that you may not hear or experience is, and especially like in Western culture, it's like we have really funny ways of treating women, but let someone talk inappropriately to a female employee, calling her a slur, openly disrespecting her, any unwanted contact. And I'm softening the language. I'm not trying to be
Yeah,
weird,
yeah,
but
yeah.
those things happen, and you will see companies move heaven and earth to get rid of those men. Uh, so it's like, I feel like as we as a society become more aware, um,
Mm.
and there's incentive for people to realize women need to participate in society too. You start to see those protections come into place. It's not a perfect science with it, but I've noticed, like in my place of work or different past employers, it's like I'm more I'm conscientious, but like as a man, it's like I'm very careful around female employees because it's like I want no cause for complaint, no cause for concern. I want you to think I want you to think about me the way that you think of a wall, there in the background, not concerned at all.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's definitely the recent times have brought this change where men are more aware of their to women, but some take it as a responsibility to, protect the women from other men and maybe even make sure that they're not a threat to the women that they're in the same community with. But some take it as oh my God, we have to be so careful around you now. Just we can't do anything, otherwise we're scared that you might, raise this complaint of sexual harassment, and like it'll take nothing for it. Like that's the kind of complaints that you get to hear from some men too. And it's hilarious because, dude, then just don't do anything questionable, right? Why is it taking such work for you to not do something questionable? Like that's the first question you should be asking those people. But it's hilarious that you get to see both sides.
yeah. Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Okay, so the United States is pretty diverse. We have um, those of European ancestry, Hispanic
Mm,
ancestry or Latino, African, like straight African directly from Africa, Africa of slave descent, Asian,
mm.
etc. Is Pakistan kind of diverse like the United States is, and civil rights and the idea of everybody getting along with each other, is that a thing over there, or is it kind of like everybody's the same and you don't see that as much?
So Pakistan is very diverse in the sense that we have a lot of, people from a Hindu descent, and we have a lot of people from Afghanistan over here. We have a lot of Pathans. That's like that's a different ethnicity. And we have a lot of Sindhis here, Balochis, we have Punjabis, and they all come from like different parts of the world, and some of them come from India, some of them will have, we also have like Chinese over here as well, from
Mm.
like they're mostly based in Islamabad, but I believe they're traveling as well to different parts of Pakistan. So we have like we have Chinese, we have like Koreans, in fact, but they're mostly in Islamabad, so I wouldn't say that counts as diversity. But
Mm.
we have a lot of those people, like different kinds, different backgrounds, different ethnicities living here. But you know, that doesn't really matter if you don't have the law in place to protect those different ethnicities and to protect those. I mean, it like what I'm trying to say is that despite there being a lot of diverse cultures, diverse ethnicities, backgrounds, and all of that, there is not much protecting us from from you know evil,
Yeah.
evil men, evil evil gangs, or terrorists. I say terrorists, but what I usually mean is men. And the governments, they're not really concerned about the general public unless it's election season. And if it's election season, only the people, only the cities or the provinces with the most development, the ones that are easiest to get to, and the ones that are easiest to get on news, get the most development or further development, and the others just you know sit in the dark, in the shadows, and crime continues that way.
Hmm. That's interesting. And kind of where I'm going with this is um, race relations in the United States. I, I know you've heard us talk about it. I know you've heard me, Zach, Antoine, and France talk about it a lot in our chat. Is
Mhm.
that as much of a problem there as it is here?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
There's not a lot of acceptance of other races, especially. I mean, I grew up thinking that it wasn't the case here, but you know how there's a massive thing about skin color in America, right? If you're dark, you grow up um, with a certain set of eyes on you, the same set of eyes, sort of the same set of eyes that uh, come on women, right? Um, there's always this fear of safety that you people like sort of grew up with. There's like a neighborhood thing and all of that. I hear that in movies, in conversations, in the news, all of that. And that's not very far off from what the different ethnicities in Pakistan face. So we have the Baloch people, and um, you won't hear conversations about them in the news, in the mainstream media, because they're not talked about enough. But they're part of our country, literally a major province in Pakistan. That's Balochistan. but you don't hear talk about them. And that's just coming from a place of bias because they're not considered as developed, as modern, as sophisticated as the Punjab province, where people are, considered educated, and they're considered, more, they're considered better, basically. And and if you hear, and basically, if a Baloch student moves to a university somewhere in Punjab, you'll see different treatment of their people from from the teachers, from their friends. There'll be bullying, and it'll be subtle, but it'll be there. And that just goes to show that racism can come in any form for anyone that doesn't conform to this certain image. And maybe it's because of how we were colonized, or maybe it's just, I don't even know what it is. But if you're not fair skinned, and if you're not, wide eyed, and you don't have a thin nose, and you're not pretty looking, then you automatically fall into the category of people who won't be taken seriously at any point in their lives unless they're a prodigy. And even then, you'll be, given a different set of rules for every room that you're in. The reason why Pathans, sometimes that's mostly the people that live in NWFP, that's a province. Um, they're somewhat taken seriously if they learn English, if they learn Urdu, and if they learn our ways, that's Punjab's ways, then they're taken seriously because they're mostly fair skinned, and they conform to the beauty standards, and they're considered very pretty people. But if they don't learn our ways, then they're not considered people who should be taken seriously. That's the kind of racism that exists here.
Mm. It sounds very similar.
Yeah,
It's different, and people will give you a chance nowadays. But like, and you're talking a lot about what would be considered like microaggressions or the behind closed doors or those things. Um,
yeah.
m- my parents, Gen X, my grandparents, baby boomers, their parents, they weren't two generations removed from slavery. My grandparents, they lived in the Jim Crow South, so um, it wasn't like it was straight up violence at one point. Um, like you had violence, you had the systemic racism. The Civil Rights Act gets passed in 1964, and then my parents lived in that transition of we're going away from racism, but it wasn't over all the time, but they still dealt with it. And one
Mhm,
of the stranger conversations had around me was, well, you're not experiencing racism, or your brother isn't experiencing racism. And it's like, no, we're not experiencing outright violence. Um,
mm,
but we still deal with it. You have to talk this way. You need to appear this way. The way my hair is cut, the way that I talk, the way that I carry myself.
mm,
Those are all ways of trying to keep myself safe. Um, I mean, even during this episode, like you've heard a couple of slips into, um, I guess what's considered non-standard English, or sorry, what's considered African American vernacular English, or Ebonics. So I'll slip into that sometimes if I feel like I'm safe, and it's not like I talk like this is how I talk. That's how I was raised, whatever. But like I can switch into that. But if I'm in the workplace, that I will
mm,
never talk to somebody that way, because
yeah,
it is unsafe for me to do so. If I'm
yeah,
out in public and I don't know you, I will never talk to somebody that way. Um,
mm,
and it has nothing to do with them as a person. It has everything to do with
How you
my,
were raised.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like watching that, and it sounds like you're Punjab, if I heard that correctly.
Punjab, yeah.
Punjab. Okay, so you're in the majority. So it's like you feel like you're cutting off part of yourself to keep the rest of yourself safe. When you're in the minority group, or in your case, you're in the majority group, but then you're a woman, and it's like, all right, there's a whole part of me that I just cannot show up in the world because that's risking my safety. Am I hearing that right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, I didn't know about these things because I grew up in Punjab. We had all
Mm,
the privilege. I grew up in a small city, but it's one of the cities. I don't know if you know about Sialkot, but it's basically the city that's responsible for, a lot of sports equipment, and it's famous for creating the World Cup football as well. So
mm,
I grew up in that city, yeah. And it's not completely unknown, and it's like it's literally in Punjab, and we had all this privilege. And then I moved to Islamabad, literally the capital of Pakistan. So there was like a lot of safety that in that sense that I grew up with. And I didn't know about these all these diverse cultures. I literally knew nothing about the kind of um the issues that the Balochistan people or the Pathans or other provinces they faced, because I was never exposed to any of that until, I was actually having a conversation with this student who mentioned all of this. And she was like, "Oh, you're from Punjab. You wouldn't know about this." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she told me that, she was facing this issue with one of her instructors in a university because he was biased against the Baloch people, and they were considered traitors or something, traitors to the country or something like that. And he wouldn't give her like proper marks in her assignments and stuff like that. And I was like, "That's outrageous. What do you mean? You should tell someone about this. Like, they can't do this." And she was like, "Tell who?" Because everyone does that. And she basically had to, fight that war on her own, because she couldn't go to anyone about it, because everyone in Punjab, basically, mostly people think like that. So that was a game changer for me, because you know I grew up a whole life without actually knowing that a whole other province of our people wasn't being given the same opportunities I was, just because of where I was born, in the same country, by the way, which is stupid.
yeah. And it's the same thing here of you talk to I've talked to well-meaning white people here, and I'm just using it for expediency. I'm not putting them down. But you talk to well-meaning white people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, what can we do to help?" Or isn't racism over? Or just any ignorant thing that they can say, and it's like, wait a second. Oh, you all don't live that. And then there's this it's so funny to me. It's like we say, like, as a culture, a minority will say something. So I think of the crack epidemic in the 80s, and the
Mhm,
war on drugs in the 70s and 80s. And it's like we're telling people cops are behaving in a corrupt manner. Um,
mhm,
drugs are a problem. The way that the media portrays our people to ourselves, this isn't going to end well. No one
mhm,
listens. And then that same idea goes from, oh, this is a black issue, nobody cares, to this is an America issue with the opioid epidemic.
mhm,
And it's like, wait, what? Didn't we just, we saw this 30 years ago? And I'm not saying this like
mhm,
I was alive back then, but
mhm,
it's like when you watch history, it's funny when something is a problem for a minority, it like no one just talks about it, but then when it hits the majority, then everyone's like, "Oh my." And now
Yeah.
you're seeing people are like taking psychological health and all of this seriously, but it it just it fascinates me that like that's a conversation that I can't have in my day to day of like, hey, this is why I don't feel safe, or this is why I do feel safe because it's not designed for me. The system, I mean, it's designed for majority men. Here, it's the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, or they look close enough to that. And I guess for you, it's the Punjab male, or people that are close enough to that.
Yeah, yeah, it's basically the male population, but they have to be from Punjab and they have to be able to speak in English and they have to be able to speak in proper Urdu and they have to, conform to a certain societal standard, as in they have to be rich, they have to have not rich, but they have to, look rich or have a house and be respectable. And if you're not any of that and if you don't fit into that box, then you drop a level lower. And if you're a woman, you drop several levels lower. And
Mm,
if you're a woman, you can only be perfect, and that's the only way you can have the same life as an average man. Only if you're perfect, you're a prodigy, you can learn things better, you can make things better, you can also make that report while at the same time doing making sure that the boss is happy and bringing him coffee. Well, we don't actually bring people coffee, but that's me exaggerating.
yeah,
But that kind of thing, like you have to be good at everything to have the same level of respect as a man who does half the things you do.
yeah. Um, I did want to bring one thing forward, and then I think this is kind of the last thought I had to offer on this topic.
Hmm.
There's this book I read by ooh, yeah, by Zora Neale Hurston called "Their Eyes Were Watching God," and
Hmm.
when it's every time I come back to this book or these thoughts, it's telling the story of Janie. She's a black woman in the 1920s.
Hmm.
Um, and she go like the way that the book progresses, her first husband, Logan Killix, he's a farmer. She's basically sold off to him because
Hmm.
um he has land, he has a good economic future. She can't work the way that the men in her family do. She goes with
Hmm.
him for a while. Um and she learns that she's not going to be loved by that man. And in his mind, love is I put a roof over your head.
Hmm.
The next one is Jody. He's outwardly more acceptable. He's economically well off, but then he eventually dies after just like he's psychologically abusive, but he eventually dies.
Hmm.
Um, the third one is where things get fascinating because the third guy she's with, Tea Cake, she loves him. And weirdly, she has the power in the relationship. She has the money from her second husband. She still maintains the store that her and her husband ran. And ultimately, like the first two were life circumstances happening for the first two men to leave. The third one was Tea Cake got bit by a rabid dog, and then Janie had to choose between herself or her love for tea cake, and she ended up shooting tea cake at the end of the book.
Oh,
And I'm sorry for spoiling the book, but
yeah.
it
I was
sounds
I was just thinking about reading it, and then you just give me that spoiler.
it's still good. It's still great to read though. Um, I shouldn't have spoiled it. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fine. I'll read it anyway. I have a
Um,
bad memory. I'll make myself forget.
okay. No, but I bring that up because it's like I feel like we can't always have conversations with people like that. Or like we can't have conversations in depth like
Mm,
this, like with other people, but people do put their experiences into literature. And it helped me to understand what a woman gives up when she's in a relationship with a man. Um, and it's like they made us read that in high school, so it's like I'm always like anytime I'm thinking about a relationship or someone's talking to me about their relationship, that conversation or like that book is always rattling around in the back of my head of women
mm.
have it very differently than men.
So there's this book I want you to read, and I
Okay.
wasn't able to finish it because it was so dark. And I don't know if you've seen Friends or not, but you know how, have you seen Friends?
A little bit. Like
So
the TV show?
yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
TV show. So there's the scene where one of the characters is reading The Shining, and
Mm,
every time it gets too scary for him, he puts it in the freezer, and that's obviously a joke. But
mm,
after starting to read A Thousand Splendid Suns, I actually came to the point where I wanted to put that book in the freezer because it became so dark in such a real way that it became very hard for me to finish. But I do want you to read it
okay.
because it's going to give you a little bit of a perspective of what it's like to be unsafe as a woman.
Yeah. I'll read that and I won't spoil this book if you want to read it. It's called Speak by Laurie Anderson.
Okay, I'll just write it in speak. Laurie Anderson. I am
Yeah.
going to read this for sure.
Okay. Trigger warning, very dark subject matter. Um, Depression, being a victim. And I've like it really opened like again, they made us read this in high school. I didn't like at the time I
Damn.
didn't think anything of it, but then it comes back around. It's like, wait a second.
Yeah, the book I just recommended to you,
Yeah.
it's very, very dark as well. I mean, it's especially dark to read as a woman because I'm telling you, I wasn't even able to, go all the way to the end. Like I was
Yeah.
halfway in there and I was like, this, I cannot do this to myself because it's literally like torturing yourself because
Yeah.
it could have very easily been you, like
Yeah.
very easy to imagine yourself in that place. And thank God we're not in that place, but it's like, just one bad decision away. So definitely a good read, but also a terrifying read.
Exactly. So,
I
did you
think
have
we're
oh,
good to wrap up now.
okay. So, did you have anything else you wanted to add or we kind of exhausted this topic
Um,
for the day?
yeah, yeah, I think we've exhausted the topic for today.
Yeah, we're at almost an hour, 10 minutes. So I'll see what's usable in here and we'll go from there. But
Yeah,
thank you for making yourself available. And I'll rewrite the show notes based on what we actually talked about and then we'll go from there.
yeah. And I think this could be a great time for us to record an episode as well. Does this time usually work for you, or is it too early?
It's early, but I can make it work. It's probably going to be the
I mean,
most
we could
stable
go
time
a
for
little,
both of us.
I mean, we could even start like at this time. What is it? 9:30 right now for your time, right?
Right. I have somewhere to be at 10 on Sunday, so it's like I have to start early or because I have to
Oh,
like I need to get dressed and go like in the next 5 minutes. So,
oh, okay. Okay, so I won't hold you back anymore.
all
Anyway,
right.
thank you so much. I had a lovely time talking
All
about
right.
this with you. I was dreading it, but it came out so naturally.
Yeah, no, but we're just conversation. I think that's kind of what we are. And then we'll see if we can get the lads to join and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You're
Bye
welcome.
bye.
All right, bye.